Good morning and welcome back to CPAC 2021 Uncanceled. I am Mike Crispi here with RSBN. Joining me now, a very special guest, Governor Scott Walker. Governor, how are you doing? How you feel about the CPAC crowd so far?
Well, outstanding. It's nice to be where it's a little cooler. I know it's hot outside, and I think it's going to get fired up inside the conference hall because people are pumped up, they're excited, they're motivated. There's a lot going on in the world. And probably one of the biggest things is how do we push back against this cancel culture?
Absolutely. Pushing back against the cancel culture. It's so pivotal right now as conservatives are being silenced because the policies of conservatism always win. So the only way that the left can win is by silencing. And I want to turn to you for a second because you had a very great run as the governor of Wisconsin. The people are probably wondering, what are you up to these days? What is Scott Walker doing to further the conservative movement? Because obviously you had a great run in Wisconsin as the governor.
Yeah, and in many ways what they did with our recall was the ultimate attempt to cancel because they tried to wipe us completely out. We prevailed, actually with more votes than we did the first time. What I'm doing now is working with Young America's Foundation. So young conservatives all across the country in college, in high school, and even now going forward with our new long game plan, we're trying to even get into the junior high and middle school because we know the left has been at this for decades. It's not just liberal bias, it's liberal indoctrination, and it's based on them closing any means of communications with our young people. So we're fighting the good fight of free speech. We're getting conservative speakers on campus. We're bringing kids in for conferences. We're getting the word out, and we have to.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true because we all know the left that they target young people. I mean, just even you see in the media, they're targeting children younger and younger. So turn to Wisconsin for a second, a state that you did a good job running. How do you feel about the state of the Wisconsin Republican Party? Obviously, it was a heated battle in the last election. In the midterms, things are going to be heating up. It's known as one of those battleground states that people pay attention to. Talk about Wisconsin politics for a minute and how you see that shaking out because people all over the country are looking at it.
Yeah, well, Republicans in the legislature did a huge move just recently. They passed a state budget. They basically forced the current governor, a Democrat, to sign with few exceptions. And so they were able to enact major tax relief parallel to what we did. In fact, since I was first governor in 2013, we've cut taxes by more than $13 billion. They've now added to that, which is great because the surplus that was generated is not the government's, it's the people. But going forward, I signed a decade ago photo identification to vote law.
Yeah.
We need to have that elsewhere in the country. They're pushing attempts to tighten that up. I think they're going to have to go to court to make sure that, particularly the two biggest counties in the state, that they enforce the law. Because remember, it's not just about changing the law when it comes to election integrity. It's about enforcing it.
Right.
You can have the strongest laws in the country, and we have some of those in Wisconsin, but if local clerks don't follow the law and the DAs in those counties are Democrats, we need to have better means to make sure they follow the law so that it's easy to vote but hard to cheat. And that's what needs to happen all across the country.
But hard to cheat. Very well said. So you're going to be giving a speech here at CPAC today. So what's going to be the main message for the audience? Give us a little preview of what you're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, they want us to know how do we push back against liberals who are trying to do anything and everything possible. I said, one, we've got to pray for the nation. Two, we got to affirm people like Senators Manchin and others who are going to stand up and defend the filibuster, because at the minimum, we got to hold off the radical indoctrination. And then for me personally, it goes back to what we were just talking about, we've got to get to more young people and we got to get to them sooner. Because you looked, a poll that just came out this week showed overwhelmingly Americans are proud to be Americans by all different age groups. You look at, even by race, for all the talk about racial problems in America, of the people who were surveyed, only 6% said they were not proud to be American. Of that sample, of the people who were black, it was only 7%. Of those who were Hispanic, it was only 9%. So overwhelming love for this country, except for one exception.
What was that?
18 to 24-year-olds, not surprisingly, a majority of them are not very exceptionally proud. We've got to make those inroads because those are the future leaders and voters that we've got to turn around.
You know, I was going to ask you that, and you actually brought it up. The young people right now out there. So a lot of people are watching RSBN. They have children, right? They might be a young conservative watching. Why do you think that the younger demographic is so skewed to the left and has been so manipulated to believe that America is not the greatest country in the world?
Well, I think two things. One, that's all they hear. And secondly, they're really not fundamentally taught history, American history or world history. One of the big things we've encouraged young people to do is find a fellow student or a family or someone in their community, their school, or their campus who's come here from another country.
Right.
Ideally, if they've come from a socialist or a communist country. If you've come from Cuba, Venezuela, if you've come from Hong Kong, the old Soviet Union, those individuals, their families love America more than anyone I've ever met because they know what's at stake. That's what our young people are missing. If there's any privilege in America, it's the privilege of having grown up here and not understanding what happens elsewhere in the world, we've got to counter that.
Very well said. I want to ask you a question about critical race theory, because as you bring it up, that's something that's been in the news right now overwhelmingly. And the sad thing is the largest teacher union in the country endorsed critical race theory. I imagine that's probably something that's a big part of your plan. Tell us a little about that and how you're going to push back against that. And why is that gaining traction with the biggest teacher unions? I know you did a great job of fighting the unions in Wisconsin. Talk a little bit about that for a second.
Yeah, it's state-sponsored racism. It's state-sanctioned racism. That's really what it is. For all the talk, one of the greatest civil rights leaders in the history of the world, Dr. Martin Luther King, in that very famous speech on the Mall, said, I have a dream that someday my 4 children will grow up in a country where they'll be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And yet, critical race theory, which again, I can never say those words without saying state-sanctioned racism, that's really what it is teaching our young people the opposite. They're teaching there's something wrong with people based on their race. There's not. We should be judging people by the content of their character. But again, sadly, if that's all you're hearing, and I think to me, there's a larger issue with this, with the teachers union,
right,
with BLM, with the other groups who are pushing this. The bottom of the line is people in the past tried to impose Marxism in our country. It failed. Why? Because we're not a class-based society. You can be the poorest of the poor and grow up to be president of the United States or the CEO of a company. Right. It's not class-based. So what are they doing now? They're trying to circle back and impose Marxism based on race, on sex, on gender. We cannot allow that to happen. We've got to educate young people about the failures of Marxism so they understand what's really at stake here.
I think that's so pivotal. I mean, that's such an important, noble cause for the future of our country. So speaking of the future of the country, talk a little bit about the midterms 2022. You're obviously a leader in the party. You paved the way. I read a New York Times article the other day talking about how you paved the way for the current, administration. Yeah. So a lot of people are talking about that. Talk about the midterms, what kind of role you're going to be playing, and how you think that's going to shake out.
Actually, I think it's going to be a great year. When Kevin McCarthy said he would bet his house they'd get the House back, I actually think that's a pretty solid bet. One of the big things that the national legacy media overlooked last fall was that despite all this talk of a blue wave, not only did the House Republicans gain seats, but I think more important for the next cycle is what they did is in all the states, every state that had a Republican legislative majority kept it. 3 more were added, 2 in New Hampshire, 1 in Alaska, and 1 state now has the trifecta with a new Republican governor, Montana. Why that matters is with the boundaries that are currently being drawn for the 2022 election,
right,
most of those states will draw them in the state legislature. A few, California, Arizona, New York, have commissions, but most of the states in this country are going to draw them in the legislature, and most legislatures are controlled by conservatives. That is a huge move, because if they even just draw remotely fair districts, unlike the gerrymandering of the past, Republican, good, solid conservative candidates will win.
Absolutely. For those of you out there, Governor Walker is talking about redistricting, which is a huge part of the fight ahead. I want to ask you a question about the Rust Belt states. So people out there, we always talk about the Rust Belt, right? Yeah. Including your state, Ohio, the Pennsylvanias of the world, the demographics that are changing. The most important thing, right? Presidents who want to be elected in 2024, they need to go through those states. It's so important. Talk about what you think the voters there are most interested in, because obviously you had your finger on the pulse there for a while. You still do in the Rust Belt states.
Yeah, those were groups of voters I did very well with, blue-collar voters. Those are groups that Donald Trump did very well with. I think conservatives with a solid message are going to do well there as well. And I think a lot of it comes off of this last year of the global pandemic.
Right.
There are really 2 kinds of America, and I'm generalizing, but there's blue-collar and white-collar. Sadly, a lot of white-collar workers were fine sitting at home on Zoom, working, their kids in the next room on the TV. They let the government walk all over them because they really didn't care because they could work from home.
Yeah.
But people like my brother and my sister-in-law who have to show up to work every day or they don't get paid,
right,
a lot of them realized that after the first 15 or 30 days, it was liberals, radicals, who were keeping them from working, who were keeping their kids out of school, who were making their life very difficult along the way. We need to remind them over and over again that the left was the one that was trying to make their life impossible by keeping things closed. As conservatives, we were the ones that actually put our faith in them, right, to make the best decisions for them and their family. I think that's a powerful message, along with an economic message that can win not only in 2022 but beyond.
I think that's a great point. I want to ask you one final question. Obviously, you ran for president in 2016. You did a great job as the governor of Wisconsin, as we discussed. What's next for you specifically? I mean, do you have plans to run in? What's next for Scott Walker? Because obviously your brand is still strong in the GOP.
Well, I'm a quarter century younger than Joe Biden. I'm literally a quarter century younger than Joe Biden.
You got a lot.
So I got a ways to
do
go.
A lot of things,
but seriously, part of the reason why I'm at Young America's Foundation, which people want to know more, YAF.org, why I'm there is in a few years, if we don't turn this age group around, it won't matter whether I or someone like me runs in Wisconsin or Michigan or Ohio. If we can't get young people on the right track, we're doomed. Now, I'm an optimist. Reagan gave me that optimism coming of age when he was president. I believe we can. I believe that's why the left is fighting so hard to cancel us out. And if we can just make any sort of inroads with young people, I believe our message of freedom and opportunity for everyone wins. I believe most young people want to be aspirational. They don't want to buy into the divisiveness of the left. And if we can do that, then whether it's me or anyone else, we're going to succeed far into the future.
Great words from Governor Scott Walker. Governor, thank you very much for joining RSBN. We really appreciate it. And best of luck, because it's a very noble fight, very important for the future of our country.
Thanks. Good to be with you.